Parker Grayson didn't mean to steal anything honestly. He was just trying to keep his 5-year-old from face-planting into a puddle when the bags got mixed up. "Come on, buddy, hold my hand, please," Parker muttered as he hoisted a grocery bag in one arm and tried to wrangle a squirming Bowen with the other. The boy was mid-tantrum over a lack of chocolate milk, and Parker had just picked up his laptop bag, except it wasn't his. Not that he noticed. Not until he was halfway home, Bowen asleep in the backseat, that he opened the sleek black bag in search of his charger and found a tablet with a fingerprint lock, a leather-bound planner with silver initials CN, and a laptop that probably cost more than his car. "What the hell?" he whispered, flipping open the planner. The inside read, "Property of Calla North." Panic hit him like a train. He'd grabbed the wrong bag at the community center. Some woman had bumped into him as he juggled bags and his whining kid. The laptop bag had looked just like his. Now, he'd driven halfway across the city with someone else's life in his passenger seat. And judging by the quality of this thing, she wasn't just some random woman. As he was rich. "Of course," he muttered, rubbing his face. "Of course this would happen to me." Calla North was not in the mood for mistakes. She was 29, newly appointed CEO of North Innovations after her father's sudden retirement, and every hour of her day was carefully scheduled until some struggling dad snatched her laptop bag at the community center and vanished into thin air. Her assistant was in full panic mode. "I already canceled your meeting with the investors," Talia said, pacing the marble office floor. "I'll send someone to trace the bag. Maybe it was stolen." "No," Calla said calmly, pulling her loose bun tighter. "It wasn't stolen. He was with a kid. He looked distracted. I don't think he meant to take it." Talia blinked. "You saw who took it." "I bumped into him. He didn't even look at me, but he had honest eyes." She paused, then smiled to herself. "And a very loud little boy." "You're being far too calm about this." "Because I think he's going to return it." Calla reached for her phone. "The planner has my address written inside. He'll show up." Parker didn't sleep that night. He sat at the tiny kitchen table in his 2-bedroom apartment, watching Bowen curled up on the couch with a blanket, while the planner and laptop sat untouched in front of him. He Googled her name. Calla North. The first result made his heart stop. She was a billionaire, not a millionaire, a literal billionaire, tech empire, philanthropist, fashion icon, one of those people who probably had champagne for breakfast and flew private just to avoid wrinkles. "Fantastic," he muttered, "accidentally robbed royalty." He barely had money for rent this month. His ex bailed a year ago, leaving him with full custody, a mountain of debt, and a kid with way too many feelings for someone so small. He worked as a mechanic by day and took delivery shifts at night. And now, he was about to return a billionaire's laptop bag like some awkward criminal. He showed up at the North Innovations building at noon the next day. Bowen in tow, he couldn't afford a babysitter. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at his faded jacket and Bowen's mismatched socks. I think I have something that belongs to Miss North," Parker said, holding up the bag. One phone call later, and he was being led to the top floor. "This place smells like soap and money," Bowen whispered as they walked past glass walls and expensive art. "Please don't touch anything." Calla was waiting for them in a sunlit office that could fit Parker's apartment twice over. She stood when he entered, tall, elegant, wearing a white blouse and black pants that probably cost more than his car, and her eyes immediately went to the boy. "You brought your partner in crime," she said softly. Bowen grinned. "I'm Bowen." Parker cleared his throat. "I'm Parker Grayson. I didn't mean to take your bag. My son was having a meltdown and grabbed the wrong one." Calla's lips curved slightly. "You didn't look inside." Not until it got home. I saw your name in the planner. I'm really sorry. Don't be, she said, stepping closer. You returned it. That's more than most would have done. She looked at him like she was studying him, not judging, just curious. And you brought your son. That was brave. He's kind of attached to me, Parker said, glancing at Bowen, who was now playing with a stress ball from her desk. I didn't have childcare. Same, she said, surprising him. He blinked. Wait, you have a kid. No, she laughed. I meant I never have time for anything that's not work, but I'd trade places with you in a second. Right, he said, awkward, because being broke and exhausted is such a dream. Calla tilted her head. You're not just some broke dad, you're a good one. Most guys would have dumped the bag and walked away. Parker didn't know what to say to that. So she added, let me buy you lunch. What? You did the right thing. Let me say thank you. There's a restaurant downstairs. And I think Bowen deserves some ice cream, don't you? Bowen's eyes lit up. Can I have 2 scoops? Parker hesitated. Everything in him said no, this was too weird, too far from his world. But Bowen tugged his hand, eyes wide. Okay, he said finally. The restaurant wasn't just fancy, it was insane. Crystal chandeliers, velvet booths, a waiter in a suit. Parker felt like an alien, but Calla acted like it was completely normal to sip sparkling water and order mac and cheese with truffle oil for a 5-year-old. So what do you do? She asked, resting her chin on her hand. I fix cars and deliver groceries at night. Busy man. Single dad life, he said, trying to keep his voice light. Calla smiled, then leaned in slightly. You're doing something right. Bowen's amazing. Parker glanced at his son, who was now drawing on a napkin with 3 forks in front of him. Thanks, he's got more personality than I can handle most days. He gets it from you. Parker looked at her, surprised. You don't even know me. I'd like to, she said simply. His throat tightened. She wasn't saying it to be nice. She meant it. And something about the way she looked at him, like he wasn't just some tired mechanic with a messy life, made his chest ache. He hadn't felt seen in years. That night, Parker lay awake in bed, Bowen snoring in the next room, and stared at the ceiling. He barely knew her. She was rich, powerful, way out of his league. But when she'd smiled at him across that table, like he was worth something, part of him wanted to see her again. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at him and seen more than just a struggling dad. She saw a man worth knowing. And he wasn't sure what scared him more, that he believed her, or that he wanted to believe it so badly. 3 days later, Parker stood at the edge of the rooftop garden at North Innovations, clutching a clipboard and wondering how the hell his life had become this surreal. Bowen was downstairs with Talia, who had insisted on keeping him entertained with coloring books and a treasure hunt she claimed was company bonding. Parker hadn't argued he was still trying to wrap his head around the fact that he'd agreed to this in the first place. You didn't tell me you were this good, Calla said from behind him. He turned to find her wearing a tailored navy dress, a tablet tucked under one arm, her heels clicking softly on the stone pathway as she approached. I'm not, Parker said, glancing at the clipboard again. I've never designed a rooftop irrigation system before or a garden layout. You fixed the drainage issue in under an hour, she replied. And you figured out why the solar panels weren't syncing with the power grid. That's more than my last contractor managed in 2 weeks. He gave a short laugh. I'm just a guy with a wrench and too much caffeine in his bloodstream. You're also the only one who didn't try to inflate the cost by 20%. Calla stepped closer, resting a hand on the edge of the planter beside him. I need someone I can trust. You've already proven you're resourceful and honest. Is this your way of offering me a job? He asked, raising an eyebrow. It's my way of offering you a contract, she said. Short-term, renovation oversight for this rooftop project. Flexible hours so you can be with Bowen. Full benefits during the term, above market pay. Parker stared at her. Why me? Because I like the way you think. And because, her gaze held his, I trust you not to pretend to be someone you're not. He didn't answer right away. The thought of stable income, of being able to buy groceries without counting coins in his pocket, was a pull he couldn't ignore. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she looked at him like he was capable of more than survival. Okay, he said slowly. I'll take the job, but only if you let me redesign the storm drainage too. I saw some serious overflow pooling near the elevator shaft. A slow smile spread across her face. You're hired. Later that afternoon, they stood together near the south wall of the garden, surveying the sunlit expanse of planters and stone. The city skyline reached behind her, but Parker barely noticed it. How did you end up running a company like this? He asked, adjusting a tool belt he hadn't worn in years. Calla exhaled, her expression shifting, thoughtful. My father built it from the ground up. He believed in legacy. When he stepped down, I didn't have a choice. It was either take the reins or watch the board dismantle everything he worked for. Sounds like a lot of pressure. It is, she glanced at him. But I'm learning that pressure can make you sharper or break you, depends on how you handle it. You seem like the type who doesn't break easily. I wasn't always. They didn't speak for a moment. A breeze pushed through the leaves, rustling the vines Parker had helped reattach to the trellis that morning. Calla shifted, her voice quieter. My mother passed away when I was 10. My father threw himself into the company. I learned early how to read a room full of men who underestimated me. Parker met her eyes. That why you do everything yourself? I used to, until I realized even the strongest people need help sometimes. He nodded, absorbing her words. I get that. She tilted her head. So what's your story, before the garage and the night shifts? He hesitated, then gave a small shrug. I used to take things apart just to see how they worked. Radios, appliances, old vacuum cleaners. My parents thought I'd end up an engineer. What happened? Life, college didn't pan out. Then Bowen came along. I've been in survival mode ever since. Her expression softened. You're doing a better job than most. Parker looked away, uncomfortable with praise. I'm just trying not to screw him up. You won't. The silence that settled between them wasn't awkward. It was thick with unspoken things, respect, curiosity, something that felt suspiciously like hope. By the time he left that day, Bowen trailing beside him with a paper crown on his head and chocolate on his chin, Parker had a folder of documents under his arm and a start date for the next morning. But more than that, he had a feeling he hadn't touched in years. A sense that maybe just maybe his life was about to change. The next week passed in a blur. Between installing lighting systems, coordinating with vendors, and updating the rooftops' outdated wiring, Parker found himself spending more and more time in Calla's orbit. Their conversations moved from business to books, from city politics to favorite foods. She asked questions like she actually cared about the answers, and she listened like she wasn't used to people telling her the truth. One afternoon, as he adjusted a panel of smart controlled misting nozzles, she showed up with 2 iced coffees and a brown paper bag. Lunch, she announced, setting it on the bench beside him. I usually grab something from the vending machine. That's not lunch, that's punishment. He pulled out a sandwich and looked at her. What's the catch? No catch, I just thought you could use something decent for once. They sat on the edge of the garden wall, legs dangling over the side, eating in companionable quiet. I'm not used to this, he said eventually. To what? Someone doing something nice without expecting anything. She didn't respond right away. Then neither am I. That night, he found a note in Bowen's backpack, written in pencil crayon. Miss Calla is cool. She gave me blue cookies. Parker stared at the note for a long time. The next day, he brought her a coffee from the corner cafe she'd mentioned once in passing. She smiled when he handed it to her, genuinely surprised. You remembered. Hard to forget someone who buys your kid blue cookies. She laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard it. And just like that, something shifted. Not with a bang, not with one of those dramatic moments you see in movies. It was quieter than that, but no less real. He was starting to fall for her, and he didn't have a single clue what to do about it. Parker didn't expect the gala invitation. It arrived in a cream envelope, hand-delivered by a courier wearing polished shoes and a watch that probably cost more than Parker's rent. Inside was thick, embossed stationery with gold lettering, and at the bottom, in unmistakably elegant handwriting, was his name. Parker Grayson, guest of Calla North. He read it 3 times before Bowen tugged on his sleeve and asked if it was a wedding. It's a fancy party, Parker said, folding the invitation carefully. Work stuff. Bowen scrunched his nose. Do I have to go? No, bud, you'll stay with Miss Talia. She makes popcorn with cinnamon, Bowen said, instantly appeased. Parker spent the next 2 days avoiding the mirror. He didn't own a suit. His best pair of slacks had a grease stain on the thigh, and the one time he rented a tux was for a wedding that ended in a bar fight. But late the following afternoon, a black garment bag appeared on his doorstep. No note, just his name on a tag. Inside was the most impeccable suit he'd ever seen. Midnight blue, tailored shoulders, silk-lined. A pair of polished leather shoes and a matte black tie completed the set. He stared at it for a long time. When he finally arrived at the gala, he felt like a misplaced extra in a movie he didn't audition for. The ballroom sparkled with gold chandeliers and flickering candlelight. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying crystal flutes of champagne, and a string quartet hummed in a far corner beneath a canopy of white orchids. He had to keep from adjusting his tie every 5 seconds. Then he saw her. Calla stood near the balcony doors, surrounded by a small group of executives. Her dress was deep navy, cut clean and simple, but it hugged her like it had been sewn onto her skin. Her hair was down for once, soft waves falling over her shoulders. When she turned and met his eyes, the entire room seemed to hush. You clean up well, she said as he approached. He exhaled. I almost didn't come. I would have noticed. You sent the suit, didn't you? I didn't want you to show up and feel like you didn't belong. I still kind of feel that way. That's because you haven't danced with me yet. She took his hand and pulled him gently toward the floor. Parker didn't dance, not since high school, but Calla moved with a quiet confidence, and when her hand slid into his and her other rested lightly on his shoulder, he forgot to worry about his feet. You've been avoiding me, she said softly. I haven't, he said. I've just been trying to figure out what this is. What do you think it is? He didn't answer. She studied him. You're scared. He held her gaze. Of what happens if I get used to this? This. You, this world. Why? Because it's not mine. It could be. He laughed low and bitter. Come on, Calla. Fix wires and scrape under cars. You wear dresses that probably have names. I didn't ask you to change. You didn't have to. They stopped dancing. The music went on around them, but the air between them was suddenly tight. I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't enough, she said. You didn't, that's the problem. You make me feel like I am, and I don't know how to live with that. She reached up and touched his jaw, her fingers light. Maybe you don't have to know yet. His breath caught. Then someone called her name. A man in his 50s with thinning silver hair and a tailored tux. He approached with a wide grin and a handshake that looked more like a power move. Calla, darling, you're glowing, and who's this? Parker stepped back instinctively. Victor, this is Parker Grayson. He's overseeing our rooftop renovations. Victor's eyes flicked over Parker's suit, his expression unreadable. Ah, well, impressive craftsmanship, Mr. Grayson. Thank you, Parker said evenly. Victor turned back to Calla. We still on for the board dinner next week? Calla nodded politely. Of course. As Victor walked away, Parker let out a slow breath. Who was that? He asked. Victor Lang. He used to be close with my father. He's on the board now. Thinks I need a husband to be taken seriously. Parker's brows rose. Let me guess, he's got a nephew. A son, she said, and a yacht. Sounds like a catch. He's allergic to children and thinks women shouldn't speak in meetings. So no. Parker looked at her, something unreadable in his chest. You really don't care what people like him say. I care about the people who show up, and you showed up. Later that night, after he dropped Bowen off at the apartment and stared at the ceiling for over an hour, he got in his truck and drove back across the city. He didn't call first, didn't text, just pulled up to her building and leaned against the hood of his truck, hands in his pockets, heart pounding like he'd just run stairs. She came out 10 minutes later, barefoot in a sweatshirt that hung off one shoulder, hair messy. She looked nothing like the woman from the gala. And everything like the one who made him feel like he could breathe. I was hoping you'd come, she said. I couldn't sleep. Neither could I. He stepped closer. I don't know what this is or what you want. She looked up at him. I want you, not because you're safe, because you're real. I'm not easy. I'm not asking for easy. He reached for her hand. This doesn't make sense. She smiled just a little. The best things never do. Then he kissed her. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and uncertain and full of everything he'd been trying to hold back for weeks. When she pulled him inside, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Parker adjusted the collar of his shirt as he stood in the glass-walled corridor outside North Innovation's executive lounge, staring down at the city below. The rooftop renovation was nearly complete, but it wasn't the final inspection that had his chest tight tonight. It was the invitation Calla had extended earlier that week. Not to another gala, not business. Dinner at her place. He hadn't answered her right away. She didn't push, but she didn't withdraw either. Now, days later, his knuckles hovered over the keypad outside her penthouse, wondering what the hell he was doing on the top floor of a building that had valet parking and a private elevator. The door opened before he could knock. I was hoping you wouldn't change your mind, Calla said, stepping aside. Her sweater was soft gray, sleeves pushed to the elbows, and her jeans had a paint stain near the knee. Her hair was pulled into a messy twist, a pencil stuck through it like a pin. She looked relaxed, normal, like she'd just come from a creative studio, not a boardroom. I almost did, Parker admitted, but Bowen told me I'd be dumb if it didn't go. Calla's mouth curved into a gentle smile. Smart kid. He stepped inside. The space was sprawling and modern, but surprisingly warm. Low lighting, soft rugs, framed photographs instead of abstract paintings. A small stack of children's books sat on the coffee table beside a half-empty juice box. Talia dropped Bowen off yesterday, she said, following his gaze. He talked me into reading 3 bedtime stories. He fell asleep on the couch. Parker blinked. You didn't have to do that. I didn't do it for you. He turned sharply. She shrugged. I did it because he wanted to be here, and because I liked having him here. I'm not used to people including him like that. Well, get used to it. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly toward the open kitchen, where the smell of something savory drifted in the air. What are you making? I ordered from 2 different places and pretended I cooked. If you tell anyone, I'll deny it. He laughed for the first time that day. I wouldn't dare. They sat on the oversized sectional, with steaming plates between them, creamy pasta, grilled vegetables. Something involving goat cheese that Parker didn't have the vocabulary to describe, but devoured anyway. She poured 2 glasses of wine and turned off the overhead lights, letting the glow from the city pour through the windows. Do you ever miss it? Parker asked, setting down his fork. Miss what? Being unknown, invisible. She considered that. Sometimes, but there's also something freeing about being seen when it's by the right person. He looked at her. I don't want to be a name on a headline, she said, or a figure on a balance sheet. I want to be more than what I inherited. I think you already are. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, glass in hand. You know what's funny? The night you returned my laptop bag, I was supposed to be in a meeting with investors. It was going to be the beginning of a new product line, something Dad would have pushed for. What happened? I canceled it, and I didn't reschedule. Because of me. No, because of what you made me remember. He frowned slightly. That I get to choose. That I'm allowed to want something other than legacy and numbers. He swallowed hard. I'm not sure I belong in your world, Calla. Maybe don't belong in mine either. The quiet between them stretched long, electric. Then she stood and walked to the window, her back to him, looking out over the city. When my father got sick, she said, her voice lower now, I took over everything. I thought if I kept the company afloat, if I made it stronger, it would keep him here longer, as if success could bargain with time. Parker stood slowly, unsure if he should step closer. I never stopped, not even after. I didn't know what else to be, until you. He moved to stand beside her, but didn't touch her. You made me look up, she said. Made me want something that wasn't about proving myself or preserving something old. You made me want something real. He turned toward her. Do you know how long I've felt like I was just surviving, like couldn't afford to want anything? Her eyes met his. And then you looked at me like I was more than just a dad trying to keep it together. You never made me feel small. You never tried to fix me. You just saw me. Her voice broke slightly. I did. And I see you. She didn't move, but her hand found his, fingers lacing. You scare me, she whispered. He exhaled. You terrify me. When she kissed him, it wasn't chaotic like before, it was slow, steady, like the quiet after a storm. And in that moment, Parker knew. He wasn't falling anymore. He'd already landed. 3 weeks later, the rooftop garden opened to a crowd of employees, reporters, and city officials. Calla gave a short speech, thanking the design team and Parker by name. Bowen stood proudly at his side, holding a clipboard he pretended to use. After the event, as the crowd dwindled and the lights dimmed, Calla took Parker's hand and led him to the far edge of the garden. I never told you, she said, but I knew you were the one who took my bag before I even opened the planner. Oh. You were the only person who didn't look at me like I was a headline. He laughed softly. I was too busy trying to keep my kid from melting down in public. And somehow, that turned out to be the best mistake of my life. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He stared, stunned. Before you panic, it's not what you think. She opened it. Inside was a key. To the guest house behind my place, renovated, 2 bedrooms, garden, Bowen picked the paint. He blinked. I want you both close, she said. Not out of obligation, not because I need fixing, but because I want you there. He looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure? Absolutely. Parker took the key. Then he kissed her again, this time, with no hesitation. And Bowen, watching from the rooftop stairs, covered his eyes with both hands and groaned loudly. You guys are in love. Calla laughed. Parker pulled her closer. And just like that, the chaos of their beginning settled into something solid, unshakable. Real. They didn't need fairy tales or perfect endings. They had each other. And that was more than enough. Calla paced the edge of the guest house porch as the late autumn wind pulled at the hem of her coat. It was the first Saturday they hadn't spent together in nearly a month, and it wasn't because either of them wanted space. It was because Parker had asked for the day to himself, with no explanation, and she hadn't pressed. She trusted him. That wasn't the problem. The problem was what she was holding. A letter, folded, worn at the creases, with Parker's handwriting across the front, for Calla. She hadn't read it yet. He'd left it on her desk that morning, tucked beneath a tiny potted lavender Bowen had planted in a peanut butter jar. No signature, no instructions. She sat down on the porch swing and unfolded it slowly, reading line by line. The wind tugged gently at the corners as her eyes moved. Calla, I've never been good with words unless I'm fixing something, but I need you to know something before I say it out loud. You changed my life, not just with the job or the house or the security. You changed the way I see myself. Before you, I was just trying to make it through the next day. Now, I think about the next 10 years, with you. If you're reading this, it's because I'm standing behind you, getting ready to ask you something. Don't turn around yet, finish the letter first. She paused, heart pounding. I know this isn't a fairy tale, and I know I'm not a polished prince, but I love you. I love how you challenge me. I love how you look at me like I'm more than I ever believed could be. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving you right for believing in me. The last line was underlined once. Turn around. She stood slowly, the letter still in her hand, and turned. Parker stood at the bottom of the steps, wearing the same navy button-down he'd worn the day they danced at the gala. Bowen stood next to him, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and trying to hide a wide grin behind them. Calla stepped down one stair, her voice barely above a breath. Are you doing what I think you're doing? Parker reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box, not black like the one that held the guest house key. This one was pale gray, soft, worn at the corners. Not brand new, not flashy. But perfect. He opened it. Inside was a ring with a single stone, set in a delicate band that caught the light like sunrise on water. I didn't want to ask you in front of a crowd, he said. I didn't want flash or spectacle. I wanted real, you and me, right here. She came down one more step, her hand against her chest. I spent my whole life thinking I had to earn the right to be seen, Parker said. But you made me feel like I already was, and I want to build something with you, not just a life, a home, a future. Bowen poked his dad gently. You forgot the question. Parker laughed softly, eyes still on her. Will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, Bowen cheering as she wrapped her arms around Parker's neck and let her forehead rest against his. Neither of them said anything for a moment. They didn't need to. Later that evening, they sat on the floor of Parker's living room, the guest house, now fully theirs, with takeout containers scattered around them, and Bowen asleep in a pillow fort nearby. Calla leaned against him, her fingers laced with his, the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. "Did you know from the beginning?" she asked quietly. "That I'd fall in love with you," Parker replied. "No, but I knew the second you looked at me like I wasn't invisible anymore, I'd never forget it." She smiled against his shoulder. "We're not like other couples." "Good. People will talk. Let them." A few weeks later, they stood in a quiet garden behind the guest house, surrounded by a small circle of friends and family. Talia officiated, barely getting through the vows without choking up. Bowen wore a tiny suit jacket and carried the rings with solemn pride. Calla wore a simple cream dress, Parker in a charcoal shirt with rolled sleeves and no tie. They didn't need grandeur. They already had everything that mattered. When they kissed, the applause was soft but full of warmth. Bowen shouted, "Finally!" and ran toward them, wrapping his arms around both. Calla knelt beside him. "How do you feel about being the best part of this family?" "You mean besides the cake?" he asked, eyes wide. Parker laughed and pulled them both close. "We're going to be okay." They were more than okay. They were whole. Months later, the rooftop garden held a new addition. A small greenhouse tucked in the corner, filled with lavender, tomatoes, and a single lemon tree Bowen named Captain Zesty. Parker managed renovations full-time now, with a small team under him and hours that let him be home for every dinner and bedtime story. Calla scaled back her travel, focusing more on the innovation labs and less on board meetings. They rarely talked about how it started. They didn't need to. Because every morning, when Parker handed her coffee and Bowen barged in with questions about the stars or dinosaurs, or how long it would take to build a rocket, they knew exactly what they'd built. Not a perfect life. A real one. And it was theirs, forever.